Thank you for attending my session. I would like to thank the organizers for having me. We don't have much time, so let's get started. My name is Daniel. I'm working at Jacala. I have a bit more than 10 years of experience in the quality assurance field. I'm currently working as a quality assurance domain knowledge lead. And for the past 3 years, I've been really passionate about accessibility, and this is why I've selected the current topic. Jacala is a data, AI, and experience company that creates meaningful and lasting impact globally. We combine strategy, technology, creativity, and operations to deliver tailored experience and transformative solutions with data and AI in heart. So, what are we going to talk about today? First, we're going to start with the accessibility. I want to lay a solid foundation so we are all on the same page what accessibility actually is. Then we're going to move to the European Accessibility Act. Then we're going to put a grain of AI on top because everything tastes better with AI. And last but not least, some concrete steps on how to become compliant. So, understanding accessibility. This might be a bit tricky for anyone that doesn't have disabilities. When I've talked to different people, the most common thing that I hear is when we talk about web accessibility is that it is for visually impaired users or blind users only. And this is a common misconception because accessibility is actually for a broad spectrum of permanent disabilities, both motor disabilities, visual disabilities, hearing disabilities, cognitive disabilities. So when we think about accessibility, we should also consider the other nuances and variations of disabilities that people might have that we need to cover for our websites. But in this fight, I want to try to prove a case that accessibility is actually a universal concept and that everyone benefits from it. So, for example, we can have temporary disabilities as well. We can have a broken arm, an ear infection, for example. So if you have an ear infection, it will be extremely beneficial for you to have closed captions. So even though you don't suffer a permanent disability, at this exact moment in time, you actually benefit from accessibility feature. And we also have situational limitations. So if you have a baby and you want to put it to sleep, and a friend of yours sends you a funny video, and you want to watch it, but you don't have your headphones, right? You want to play the video with captions. Again, you're a perfectly healthy person, but features that are accessibility specific will benefit you. How do we achieve accessibility? With the core principles of WCAG or WCAG. So, the P stands for perceivable. This is how we perceive the information through our senses, with our eyes, ears, and the tips of our fingers. So the thing that you can remember is that you should convey the information through at least two ways of it being perceived. So if you can't see, you should be able to hear it. If you can't hear it, you should be able to see it. And if you can't hear it or see it, you should be able to feel it with your fingers. O stands for operable. This is how we interact with the platform. So we should be able to interact with all sorts of pointers like mouse stick, trackpad, but also we should be able to navigate with keyboard, use voice commands, and all that assistive technology that is being used by everyone. Understandable is, for example, if we follow the good practices in the design. Have all the needed landmarks, the header, the footer, the navigation, everything is in place. So when you open the website, you can quickly navigate to it without having to wonder where is the navigation, for example. Also here we can add the language. What language the site uses, the level of the language. So if the language is on a higher level, a person with cognitive disabilities or a foreigner whose mother tongue is different than this one might suffer and might not understand what you're trying to say. So in that case, you can add a glossary, for example, to tackle this problem. And last but not least, we have robust. Robust means that the website should work on any device and with any assistive technology that an end user might use. So why did I share the previous slide? Well, the European Accessibility Act actually enforces WCAG or WCAG 2.1 standard AA. There is a new revision that is 2.2 that I would recommend you use. It has a bit more coverage and it will future-proof your accessibility efforts. The European Accessibility Act was created in order to unify the accessibility laws across the European Union. Before that, different countries have their versions of accessibility laws, some good, some bad, some even didn't have accessibility laws. So if you wanted to operate in the EU, you would have tough time in being compliant in every country. So long story short, in 2019 it was officially adopted. In 2020 it was transposed into national legislation, and June 28 this year it was officially enforced, which means that from this date onward, any website that is in the scope of the European Accessibility Act, and we're going to talk about the scope in the next slide, must be compliant. If the website has launched prior to this date, there is a 5-year transitional grace period for you to become compliant. The scope of the EAA can be grouped into 3: products, services, and digital interfaces. For the scope of our current presentation for DrupalCon, we can safely say that EAA is for websites that are for banking, e-commerce, transport booking systems, and audiovisual content distribution. So if your type of business is not listed here, then EAA isn't applicable. But even if it is, you can get exempt. The first point of exemption is micro enterprises providing services. If you're a micro enterprise, which is less than 10 employees and less than 2 million euro annual turnover, you're considered a micro enterprise, and this exempts you from EAA. If you're serving archived content, which means that this is a content that was initially created some time ago and you no longer update it, so for example e-commerce websites, and you have some page about iPhone 10 that is not sold anymore, it's only there if someone wants to check the specs of the iPhone, this is can be considered an archived page, and it is safe. It is not it can be exempt from the EAA. If you are if you are displaying third-party content, so if that third-party content you don't have any control over it, it is exempt from EAA. However, if the company that is providing you with that content is somewhat related to your company, you are not exempt, so this is not a workaround to consider. The disproportionate burden clause is an interesting one. It basically means that if the implementation of accessibility will cost you more than you can afford, you can file the disproportionate burden clause. We cannot get into details since it's a topic on its own for a session. However, just know that it is possible to not be compliant to EAA if you can't afford it. And last but not least, we have the fundamental alteration. What this means is that if you can prove that becoming accessible will actually change the initial core purpose of that website that you're building, and it will no longer serve its purpose, it means that it will be fundamentally altered. If this is the only way for it to become accessible, you will be exempt from the EAA as well. And we all want to hear what are the penalties. So for the risks and benefits of the compliance, I'll start with that. The legal penalties vary from country to country and depending on your company, the magnitude of the problems that you have, etc., etc. But they start as low as 5,000 euro and can reach 5% of the annual company turnover. And they stack. So if you operate in 15 countries from the EU and all of them can fine you, so you can have 15 fines, If, let's say, the average is 1% of the annual turnover, you can get 15%, which is quite costly. And immediately you see that becoming accessible is not that expensive. Other risks, of course, are reputational harm and market restrictions, since no one wants to be known as the company that isn't compliant and isn't building compliant websites. And there are government, non-government bodies, and even organizations that don't want to work with companies who are not being accessible. In terms of the benefits, the first and foremost is broader customer base. In EU, there are 80 million people who are registered with disabilities, which is quite a significant amount of people. Now, not everyone will be your customer, of course, but just consider the fact, 80 million people. Of course, you have the competitive edge, enhanced user experience, as we've mentioned, everyone benefits from accessibility. You have the better search engine optimization, etc., etc. The list of benefits is quite big. Now let's put a bit of AI on top of everything. How AI can empower designers and front-end developers. Right now we have the color and contrast analysis. We can have the standard tools, which is like static code analysis. It compares two neighboring colors and determines the color contrast ratio. This is what we currently have. We've been having this for years. But we can go a step further, and using an AI we can determine all the possible variations of colors that we have in our design palette, all the background images or SVGs that we plan on implementing, all those colors with the background colors and the font size, since the font size is important as well. And we can do that analysis extremely quickly. We can also consider the fact, with the help of AI, that they're colorblind people, so you should not convey information through color, and AI can spot possible problems with information being provided using color. For example, there is a sentence and the proverb is marked in red, right? So yes, but if you're a colorblind person, you don't know that it is red. What red means, right? So there should be a second way of conveying information, and AI can help with that. Also with object recognition and area suggestion. There is let's say a standard package of components that every website has, like CTA, sliders, etc., etc., etc. With the help of AI, it can quickly spot the objects and propose how to make them accessible with the area attributes. For the backend developers, we all know the integration with different IDEs, different linting tools and IDE extensions, so you can quickly spot problems on the go and use AI for the auto completion when you build components from scratch. For the quality assurance team, first we have the automated testing. The current automation testing has about 50% test coverage, which is not great, not terrible. However, we would like to improve it, and we couldn't improve it for quite a number of years. The main problem is that in order to pass that 50% mark, we need context and reasoning, stuff that we didn't have prior to AI. So nowadays, with the help of AI, we can increase the scope and have better coverage when we do the automation testing. The Ask Me Anything is also something that might turn out useful. You can train a model with all the documentation about accessibility, about EAA, about WCAG, etc., etc. And then you can write down your case of testing something, for example, a slider, and it will return some potential test cases and approaches how to test this ticket if you don't know what you're how to test it. Of course, this might have problems, and we'll get to that in a minute. For content editors, smart text editors are great because not many text content creators are experienced in generating accessible text. or providing glossary and keyword management, etc., etc. With the help of AI, this can be solved. Of course, you can use it to generate alternative text for images because most of the images require alternative text. The problem is that this alternative text, of course, should be then manually reviewed because you might face problems. That's why I thought that use with caution. And the last point is about glossary and keyword management that I've already mentioned. Now, AI is super helpful, but it has its drawbacks. The first one that I've noticed in many companies is the over-reliance. A lot of people think of AI as a panacea, as something that can cure everything. AI by itself is a great tool that should be used by the hands of an experienced accessibility professional. If you think that AI on its own will improve a lot and will handle the accessibility, you're wrong and you have bad time, especially if you must be EAA compliant. The data bias and cultural insensitivity can be observed quite a lot when you try to generate alternative text for images, because the model itself is imperfect since it's made by humans and it's trained by humans. So it can create alternative texts that are not, let's say, proper. They're not correct, and you might have bad time. Contextual misinterpretation can be considered also hallucination. So I've seen cases where AI can proposes to have alternative text for background images, which is in fact wrong. Background images should not have alternative text. But the model was trained really well and still made that mistake. So that's why I'm trying to say that it should be used by experts who know when the model is doing something wrong, to be able to challenge it. And last but not least, language and localization challenges. If you want to use AI to unify processes across multiple countries, offices with different culture and different language, you might have bad time. First, because one model might excel in one language but be terrible in another. And at the moment you start to make things better, you unify them. If you're not using locally hosted model, it might get changed, so you have to start basically from scratch. As action points, I can propose you with these 5 points. First, start small. Find the websites that you're working on that should be EAA compliant. Open the home page. Do the testing on the home page. Create good documentation. You should document everything. This documentation will then serve you in front of the authorities should they ask you for what have you done in order to become compliant. Documentation of everything found and fixed and mitigation steps for possible regressions are extremely important things for your EAA compliance. But as I've said, start small, document everything step by step, just the first page, the first component. Then share knowledge. If you have one experienced person on the team, make a whole team around him from different departments. Let him train them. Let them share knowledge between each other. What have they faced? What problem do they have? How do they solve it? Then let them collaborate, because accessibility as part of any quality initiative is owned by the whole team. So it cannot be owned just by the accessibility expert, just by the quality assurance guy, just by the development team, front-end designer. It is a quality initiative and it's owned by everyone. So everyone should be working on accessibility at the same time. Staying updated is relatively easy in terms of accessibility because the regulations are not changing that often. As a matter of fact, pretty rarely. The only thing that is changing super often, of course, are the tools and the technology part. So you should stay up to date because, as I've mentioned, it will help you a lot in increasing the scope of your test, especially the automated part. And last but not least, I would suggest reading the EAA document and the WCAG or WCAG. Just reading it once or twice won't make you an expert advocate, you won't learn it by heart. But the best thing that it will do is it will create the mental links needed, so when you see a problem or potential problem, you know that you've read that somewhere and you'll be able to quickly find that reference in a document and take the needed actions. Just knowing that this might be a problem and be able to find it is a good enough first step. In conclusion, I can say that all of us, we're working in different fields, building websites for customers from all over the world, every type of industry. As you can see in the scope, not that many industries are part of the EAA. However, there are a million people around the world using internet that have disabilities. And the internet is the easiest place where they can live a fulfilling life, like finding jobs, finding and communicating with friends, finding spouses, having hobbies, purchasing what they need. So my appeal to you is to spread the word about accessibility and know that by building accessible websites, you're actually making the world a better place. Thank you.